Chapter 6. Sherlock Holmes gives a demonstration. "Now, Watson," said Holmes, rubbing his hands, "we have half an hour to ourselves. Let us make good use of it. My case is, as I have told you, almost complete, but we must not err on the side of overconfidence. Simple as the case seems now, there may be something deeper underlying it." "Simple?" I ejaculated. "Surely," said he, with something in the air of a clinical professor expounding to his class. "Just sit in the corner there, that your footprints may not complicate matters. Now to work. In the first place, how did these folk come, and how did they go? The door has not been opened since last night. How of the window?" He carried the lamp across to it, muttering his observations while he moved, but addressed them to himself rather than to me. "Window is snibbed on the underside. Framework is solid. No hinges at the side. Let us open it. No water pipe near. Roof quite out of reach. Yet a man has mounted by the window and regained little last night. Here's a footprint of mold upon the sill, and here's a circular muddy mark, and here again upon the floor, and here again on the table. See, Watson, this really is a pretty demonstration." I looked around at well-defined muddy discs. "That is not a footmark," said I. "It is something more valuable to us. It is the impression of a wooden stump. You see here on the sill is a boot mark, a heavy boot with a broad metal heel, and beside it is the mark of the timber toe." "It is a wooden-legged man." "Quite so. But there has been someone else, a very able and efficient ally. Would you scale that wall, Doctor?" I looked out to the open window. The moon still shone brightly on the angle of the house. We were a good 60 feet from the ground, and, look where I would, I could see no foothold, nor as much as a crevice in the brickwork. "It is absolutely impossible," I said. "Without aid, it is so. But suppose you had a friend up here who lowered you down this good rope, and I see in the corner, securing one end to the great hook on the wall. Then I think, if you were an attractive man, you might swarm up, wooden leg and all. You would depart, of course, in the same fashion, and your ally would draw up the rope, untie it from the hook, shut the window, snip it on the side, and get away in the way he originally came in. A minor point, it may be noted," he continued, fingering the rope, "that our wooden-legged friend, though a fair climber, was not a professional sailor. His hands were far from the horning. My lens discloses that more than one blood mark, especially towards the end of the rope, from which I gather that he slipped down with such a velocity that he took the skin off of his hand." "This is all very well," I said, "but the thing becomes more intelligible than ever. How about this mysterious ally? How came he into the room?" "Yes, the ally," repeated Holmes pensively. "There are features of interest about this ally. He lifts the case from the regions of the commonplace. I fancy that this ally breaks fresh ground in the annals of crime of this country, though parallel case suggests themselves from India, and if my memory serves me, from Gambia." Man. "How came he, then?" I reiterated. "The door is locked and the window is inaccessible. Was it through the chimney?" "The grate is much too small," he answered. "I had already considered that possibility." "How then?" I persisted. "You will not apply my precepts," he said, shaking his head. How often have I said to you that when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth? We know that he did not come through the door, the window, or the chimney. We also know that he could not have been concealed in the room, as there are no concealable possible. Whence, then, did he come? He came through the roof, I cried. Of course he did. He must have done so. If you will have the kindness to hold a lamp before me, I shall now extend our researches to the room above, the secret room in which the treasure was found. He mounted the steps and seized a rafter of either hand. He swung himself up into the garret, then lying on his face, he reached down for the lamp and held it while I followed him. The chamber in which we found ourselves was about 10 feet one way and 6 the other. The floor was formed in the rafters, and a thin lath of plaster between, so that the walking had to step from beam to beam. The roof ran up to the apex, and was evidently the inner shell of the true roof to the house. There was no furniture of any sort, no accumulated dust of years, and lay thick upon the floor. Here you are, you see, said Sherlock Holmes, putting up his hand against the sloping wall. This is a trapdoor which leads out to the roof. I can press it back, and here is the roof itself, sloping at a gentle angle. This, then, is the way that number one entered. Let us see if we can find some other traces of this individuality. He held out the lamp to the floor, and as he did so, I saw for the second time that the knight started, a surprised look come over his face. For myself, I followed his gaze. My skin was cold under my clothes. The floor was covered thickly with the prints of a naked foot, clear, well-defined, perfectly formed, and scarce half the size of an ordinary man. Holmes, I said in a whisper, a child has done this horrid thing. He had recovered his self-possession in an instant. I was staggered for the moment, he said, but the thing is quite natural. My memory failed me, or should I have been able to foretell it? There's nothing more to be learned here. Let us go down. What did you say, then, as to those footmarks? I asked, eagerly, as he regained the lower room once more. My dear Watson, try a little analysis yourself, he said, with me a touch of impatience. You know my methods. Apply them, and it will be instructive to compare results. I cannot conceive anything which will cover the facts, I answered. It will be clear to you soon enough, he said, in an offhand way. I think that there is nothing else of importance here, but I will look. He whipped out his lens and tape measure and hurried about the room on his knees, measuring, comparing, examining, with his long, thin nose only a few inches from the planks, and his beady eyes gleaming in a deep set like those of a bird. So swift, silent, and furtive were his movements, like those of a trained bloodhound picking out a scent, that I could not but think what a terrible criminal he would have made had he turned his energy and sagacity against the law, instead of exerting it in its defense. As he hunted about, he kept muttering to himself, and finally he broke out into a loud crow of delight. "We are certainly in luck," he said. "We ought to have very little trouble now. Number one has had the misfortune to tread on the kerosite. You can see the outline of the edge of the small foot here, and the side of the evil-smelling mess. The carboy has been cracked, you see, and the stuff has leaked out." "What then?" I asked. "Why, we have got them, that's all," he said. "I know a dog that could follow the scent to the world's end. If a pack can track a trailed herring across the Shire, how fast can a specifically trained hound follow a pungent smell like this? It sounds like the sum of the rule of three. The answer should give us, but here we have the accredited representatives of the law." Heavy footsteps and clamor, loud voices were audible from below, and the whole door shut in a loud crash. "Before they come," said Holmes, "just put your hand here and put this poor fellow's arm, and here his leg. What do you feel?" "The muscles are hard as a board," I answered. "Quite so. They're in a state of extreme contraction, far exceeding the usual rigor mortis. Coupled with the distortion of his face, this Hippocratic smile, and his riscus sardonicus, as the old writers called it, what conclusion would you suggest to your mind? Death from some powerful vegetable alkaloid, answered. Some strychnine-like substance, which would produce tetanus. That was the idea which occurred to me the instant I saw the drawn muscles on the face. On getting into the room, I at once looked by the means of the poison into the system. As you saw, I discovered the thorn which had been driven or shot with no great force into the scalp. You observe that the struck part, which was that part was turned towards the hole in the ceiling, the men were erect in the chair. Now examine the thorn. I took it up gingerly and held it to the light of the lantern. It was long, sharp, and black, with a glazed look near the point, as though some gummy substance had dried upon it. The blunt end had been trimmed and rounded off with a knife. "Is that an English thorn?" he asked. "No, it certainly is not." "With all these data, would you be able to draw some inference? But here are the regulars, and the auxiliary forces may beat a retreat." As he spoke, the steps which had been coming nearer sounded loudly on the passage, and a very stout, portly man in a grey suit strode heavily into the room. He was red-faced, burly, and plethoric, with a pair of very small, twinkling eyes, which looked keenly out from between stone and puffy pouches. He was closely followed by an inspector in uniform, and by the still palpitating Thaddeus Sholto. "Here's a business," he said, in a muffled, husky tone. "Here's a pretty business, but who are all these? Why, the house seems to be full of rabbit warren." "I think you must recollect me, Mr. Altheny Jones," said Holmes quietly. "Why, of course I do," he wheezed. "It's Sherlock Holmes, the theorist. Remember you? I never forget how you let these turned on all causes and interferences and effects of the Bishopgate jewel case. It's true you set us on the right track, but you'll own it now that it's more good luck than good guidance." It was a piece of simple reasoning. "Oh, come now, come. Never be ashamed of grown up. But what is all this? Bad business, bad business. Stern facts here. No room for theories. How lucky that I happened to be out at Norwood over another case. I was at the station when the message arrived. What do you think the man died of?" "Oh, this is hardly a case for me to theorize over," said Holmes dryly. "No, no, still, we can't deny that you hit the nail on the head sometimes. Dear me, door locked, I understand. Jewels worth 500,000 missing. How was the window?" "Fastened. But there are steps on the sill." "Well, well. If it was fastened, the steps could have nothing to do with the matter. That's common sense." "Man might have died in a fit, but then the jewel's missing. Ha! I have a theory. These flashes come upon me at times. Just step aside, Sergeant, and you, Mr. Sholto, your friend can remain. What do you think of this, Holmes? Sholto was, on his own confession, with his brother last night. The brother died in a fit, on which Sholto walked off with the treasure. How's that?" "On which the dead man was considerately got up and locked up the door on the inside." There's a flaw here. Let us apply common sense to the matter. This Sholto was with his brother. There was a quarrel, so much we know. The brother is dead, and the jewels are gone. So much we also know. No one saw the brother from the time Thaddeus left him. His bed had not been slept in. Thaddeus was evidently in the most disturbed state of mind. His appearance is, well, Not attractive. You see that I'm weaving my web round Thaddeus. The net begins to close upon him. You are not quite in possession of the facts yet, said Holmes. The splinter of wood, which I have every reason to believe has been poisoned, was in the man's scalp where you will see the mark. This card, inscribed as you see it, was on the table, and beside it lay this rather curious stone-headed instrument. What does that all fit into your theory? Confirms it in every respect, said the fat detective pompously. House is full of Indian curiosities. Thaddeus brought this up, and if the splinter be poisonous, Thaddeus may have made murderous use of it in any other man. The card is some hocus-pocus, a blind, as like as not. The only question is, how did he depart? Ah, of course, there's a hole in the roof. With great activity, considering his bulk, he sprang up the steps and squeezed through into the garret, and immediately afterwards we heard his exulting voice proclaiming that he had found the trap-door. He can find something, remarked Holmes, shrugging his shoulders. He has occasional glimmerings of reason. Il n'y a pas de solucis commodus case qui hunts bespait. You see, said Anthony Jones, appearing down the steps again. Facts are better than theories, after all. My view of the case is confirmed. There's a trapdoor communicating with the roof, and it is partly open. It is I who opened it. Oh, indeed. Did you notice it, then? He seemed a little crestfallen at the discovery. Well, whoever opened it. It shows how our gentleman got away. Inspector! Yes, sir, came from the passage. Ask Mr. Sholto to come this way. Mr. Sholto, it is my duty to inform you that anything which you say will be used against you. I arrest you in the Queen's name as being concerned in the death of your brother. There now! Didn't I tell you? Cried the poor man, throwing us out his hands, and looked from one to the other of us. Don't trouble yourself about it, Mr. Sholto, cried Holmes. I think I can engage to clear you of the charge. Don't promise so much, Mr. Theorist. Don't promise too much, snapped the detective. You may find it harder a matter than you think. Not only will I clear him, Mr. Jones, but I will make you a free present of the name and description of one of the two people who were in the room last night. His name, I have every reason to believe, is Jonathan Small. He is a poorly educated man, small, active, with his right leg off, and wearing a wooden stump which is worn upon the inner side. His left boot, of course, square-toed shoe, with an iron band around the heel. He is a middle-aged man, much sunburned, and has been a convict. These few indications may be of some assistance to you, coupled with the fact that there is a good deal of skin missing from the palm of his hand. The other man? Ah, the other man, asked Thaddeus Jones in a sneering voice, but impressed nonetheless. I could see easily the precision of the other's manner. He's a rather curious person, said Sherlock Holmes, turning upon his heel. I hope before very long to be able to announce to you the pair of them. A word with you, Watson. He led me out on the head of the stair. This is an unexpected occurrence, he said, has caused us rather to lose sight of the original purpose of our journey. I've just been thinking so, I answered. Is it not right that Miss Morrison should remain in this stricken house? No. You must escort her home. She lives with Miss Cecil Forrester in Lower Camberwell, so it is not very far. I will wait for you here if you will drive out again, or perhaps you are not too tired? By no means. I don't think I could rest until I know more of this fantastic business. I've seen something of a rough side of life. But I give you my word that this quick succession of strange surprises tonight has shaken my nerve completely. I should like, however, to see the matter through with you, now that I have got so far. Your presence will be of a great service to me, he answered. We will work the case out independently, and leave this fellow Jones to exult over the mare's nest, which he may be choosing to construct. When you have dropped off Mrs. Morstan, I wish you to go to number 3 Pension Lane, down near the water's edge at Lambeth. The third house on the right-hand side is a bird stuffer's. Sherman's the name. You will see a weasel holding up a young rabbit in the window. Knock old Sherman up and tell him, with my compliments, that I want Toby at once. You will bring Toby back in the cab with you. A dog, I suppose? Yes, a queer mongrel with the most amazing power of scent. I would rather have Toby's help than of the whole detective force of London. I shall bring him then, I said. It is 1 now. I ought to be back before 3, if I can get a fresh horse. And I, said Holmes, shall see what I can learn from Miss Burnstone, and from the Indian servant who, Mr. Thaddeus tells me, sleeps in the next garret. Then I shall study the great Jones's wisdom, and listen to his not too delicate sarcasms. Warsen gewont, dass die München verhonsen was sich nicht return. Gareth is always pithy.